Hello, the date is August 20th, 2019, and this is a brief summary on how to fill out the State Summer Games roster and registration forms for Special Olympics Montana. First, if you are an LPC or head coach for your team or delegation, you should have received an email that includes all the necessary resources for State Summer Games. If you did not receive this email, please contact the state office. If you received the email or did not receive the email and do not have access to the resources, you can always find those resources at the Special Olympics Montana website page. That page can be found at SOMT.org. Once you come to the home page, you want to take your mouse and highlight on the Sports tab, go down to Our Sports, highlight that, go to the right, and then click on State Summer Games. This will take you to the State Summer Games page on the website, and after you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there is a section called Games Resources. Under Games Resources is where you can find all of the State Summer Games resources needed, including the roster and registration forms. They currently are not on the website for this recording, as they are in the process of being revised for the 2020 games, and they will be revised on a yearly basis. But this is where they will be once they are ready. Once you come to the website and you find the resource that you need, as long as it is in red letters or red numbers, you can click on the link. It will download down here in the bottom corner. On Windows, on MacBook, it should be similar. You can click and open it, and that's where you will find the editable roster and registration forms. First, we are going to review the State Summer Games roster form and how to properly fill it out. The roster form will look similar to this and will almost always be in a spreadsheet setup. There are two ways to submit the spreadsheet that we will cover at the end of the training session. The first part of this State Summer Games roster form is the top half of the document. All of the information in the top half of this document needs to be answered. For future documents, the due date will be listed in the document. Again, this is for the 2019 games. And as the games have been completed at this point, it will be updated for 2020 and will contain who to submit your roster or registration to, and what the due date is. As mentioned, that is currently in revision for 2020. But the information at the top of this document needs to all be filled in, or it will be returned for modification and not accepted until it is completed. Here, the first, we're going to fill this out. The first box here is the delegation box. Now, this is the name of your delegation or your team. So if you are coming from Missoula and you are the Missoula Bears, you would type in Missoula Bears. If you're coming from Glendive, you would type in Glendive Special Olympics or the Glendive Athletics or whatever your team name is from Glendive. Since this is being recorded at the state office, we are going to put down SOMT State Office as our team name. LPC. The LPC is the head coach or the local program coordinator for your team, the person who should be receiving all of the emails. So in this case, we're just going to make up a name, and that'll be Jim Smith. Next, you're going to want to list your LPC's phone number. So that is the best number to contact your LPC at in the event we have questions or need revisions. So we'll just type in a random number, as this person, Jim Smith, does not exist. And then you want to list your LPC email. That could be js@123.com. The next 4 questions have to do with meals provided at state summer games. And you have to answer all of these, or again, it will be returned for revision. The first question is, I would like to participate in a team dine-out on Thursday. Now, the team dine-out is currently a meal that is offered to the teams and is provided by local volunteers on Thursday evening of games, just before the carnival and dance. If you want your team to have the opportunity to go to a team dine-out, then you want to list yes in the box. If not, just type in no. In this case, we're going to say yes, we want that dine-out. The same thing goes for the next 3 boxes. Does your team want Wednesday lunch provided? Does your team want Thursday lunch provided? And does your team want Friday lunch provided? In this case, we're just going to type in yes for all 4 of those, or all 3 of those. The next question is, does your delegation plan on attending opening ceremony? Yes or no? The final question for this form, there may be additional questions added in the future, so make sure to answer those if they're there. But the final question for this form is, we will be bringing a bus, and this is its length. If you are not bringing a bus, just type in no. If you are bringing a bus, type in yes with a comma and how big it is. So we'll say 23-foot bus. If you're bringing multiple buses, just to note, you're bringing 2 23-footers, or however long the bus is. This helps us plan for parking at opening ceremony, carnival dance, and other high traffic areas. Next, we're going to move down to the roster boxes for your teams. Down here, you want to fill out all the information for each person who could possibly be attending. This is not your final roster, but it is your preliminary roster. So what we want to list here is the first name, last name, whoever the person is, his role on your team. So athlete, unified partner, coach, LPC, volunteer, etc., etc. And then what their anticipated sports are. So currently, athletes and partners are allowed to participate in 2 different sports at state summer games. And while this does not need to be finalized, it does let us anticipate what your athletes may be participating in, so we can prepare the venues for the amount of participants that will be attending. So, as an example here, we are going to list 3 athletes, 3 partners, and 3 volunteers. Well, let's do 4 athletes. So just bear with me here as we fill this in, and I'll show you exactly how we want it filled in. Again, list their role, and then list their sport. So whatever their sport is, you'll want to throw it in here. So we'll list kayaking as Jeff Rogers' first sport. Kayaking is a Wednesday sport. Another thing you'll want to keep in mind is use the game's information packet to pick your sports. Athletes are not allowed to do 2 sports on the same day. They have to be 2 sports, both on separate days. So we'll say the second sport is athletics on Friday. Next person will list, and keep in mind it also helps if you put all of your delegation members either in alphabetical order or in order by their role. So put all the athletes in a row, or do them in alphabetical order by their last name. So next one, in this case, we're going to go just by their role. Well, another thing to keep in mind is your athletes are not required to do 2 different sports. They can participate in one sport if they desire. Use the game's information packet as a resource. Another thing to keep in mind is under role, you can abbreviate it. So for unified partner, which may not necessarily fit in that box, you can put UP. For athlete, you can put an A. Whoever is entering at the state office does understand what the abbreviations mean. It is nice to fill in the entire word if you can, though. Also keep in mind, if your LPC is attending as part of your team, list them in this bottom half as well. So Jim Smith above, make sure you list him below also. Now, if you're going to list somebody as a coach, we ask that you list that coach and their primary sport that they are a coach in. So with Larry Waters, we'll say he's a coach and that he is a kayaking coach. You don't have to list all the sports that your volunteer may be participating in, but list their primary sport. This helps us for recording purposes. If they are a volunteer, you do not need to list a primary sport, only for coaches. Once you have completed the entire, you've completed a box for your entire delegation, make sure to save and submit this to the state office, whoever's name will be listed at the top of the sheet in a box. If you cannot edit this on your computer or do not have access to editing privileges, you can print this form off, fill it out by hand with neat handwriting, and then scan and submit this over email to the state office. If you choose to mail the document in, you must have it mailed and received by the state office by the due date. It will be considered late if it does not come by the due date listed at the top of the form. Next, we're going to move on to the registration form. The registration form is essentially the roster form that is also going to include the scores that the state office will use to division your athletes into heats. So similar to the other form, you have to fill in all of the information at the top of the sheet. If we can remember who our LPC was here. Here in the middle of the page, there are other notes. These other notes denote how you need to submit your scores. So it says time scores need to be submitted in hours, minutes, and seconds. Distance scores need to be submitted to meters and centimeters. This also says see attached sheet for registration instructions. The first section at the top is for everybody that isn't a unified partner or a volunteer or an athlete. It is for only volunteers, coaches, LPCs, area directors, or anyone else who may be attending as part of your delegation but will not be competing in an event. So what we're going to do here is, if you recall the other form, all of the LPC, the 2 coaches, and the volunteer, how many ever you have, but in this case, the ones we listed would go in this section. So first we would start with Jim. His role would be LPC, and we don't have to list a sport for him again since he is not a coach. And if you have the italics like this, it is not a big deal, even though you can switch it back to normal text if you like. Once you have finished with that section, move to the section below. There are 2 examples on how to fill out a registration form, but we're also going to walk through more examples. The first box, as you can see here, you're going to want to list your athlete's first and last name, athlete or unified partner's first and last name. The next box below, you will list their role. The blocks below that, you will note whether they utilize a wheelchair and whether it is a manual wheelchair or a power wheelchair. If yes, you just want to put a Y. If no, put an N. If it's manual, list an M right after the Y. If power, list a P right after the Y. Moving on to the next boxes. As you can see here, we have examples, but we are going to fill out the boxes down here and go through it. Our first athlete we had listed was Jeff Rogers. He's an athlete, and for the sake of the argument here as we fill this out, none of our athletes or unified partners utilize a wheelchair, but in the case they do, again, use this example as a reference on how to fill that out. Once you have finished with your athletes, you can also list the unified partners. Now keep in mind, you do not have to list everybody in order, although it does help to do it in alphabetical order or by order of role. So either last name alphabetical order, what their role is, all the athletes, all the partners, or another option for the registration form is to list them by the teams they're on if they have teams. In this case, we're going to list them just by their role. So once we have finished our athletes, we're going to move on to our unified partners. And again, you don't have to type in unified partner. You can type in UP to denote unified partner. Once we have finished that, we're going to want to make sure to list all of the events, the submitted, their sports, their events, their score and time that you are submitting for them, because that is how we will division your athlete into competition. And if they are on a team for that event, whatever their team name is. Do the same thing with events. You can see here we have event number 1. If they're doing more than one event in the sport that day, put that here in the event number 2, move right. And then if they are in a relay event that day, list the relay event, the time, and the team name. So we're going to go through these one at a time here. Jeff Rogers on the roster form. Again, you can change the sport that you had on the roster form, but again, for the example, we are going to keep them the same. On the roster form, Jeff was listed as a kayaker. So we're just going to put in kayak. If kayaking doesn't fit, you could just put kayak, but in this case it does fit, so we're going to put kayaking in the Wednesday, as it is a Wednesday sport. If it was Thursday, we'd want to list it in the green box. If it's Friday, in the blue box. But as this is Wednesday, we're going to leave it in the orange box. Now, Jeff's first event, we're going to say, is the 200 meter. Now that is an individual race, so we'll want to put in his time of 200 meters. We'll say he does it in 1 minute and 20 seconds. Now you can go into hundredths of a second. Remember, all time scores need to be submitted in hours, minutes, and seconds. So you can go into hundredths of seconds if you wish. You would just have to change the format up a little bit in Excel. As you can see, it switched the format. You do not have to go into hundredths though, as there is no distinct advantage to that. But make sure when you type it in that you either change the format so it comes out like this, and it doesn't come out like this into 448, because that's just the way the formatting works. The formatting can be changed up here in this section, but we want to make sure, if possible, again, another way to do this is to make sure it is as distinct as possible, because your athletes can be penalized if their scores are significantly different from what they do at the state competition. So another option is to put 1M and then 12S. So right there, that is the easiest way to do it, because it distinguishes 1 minute, 12 seconds. So we'll put that in for Jeff. Now, Jeff's second event, so we're going to skip through teams since it's an individual event. There's no need to list the team name. There in event number 2, we're going to say he is doing the 200 meter, and you can type in unified if it fits. As you see, it does drop down. So that is the ideal way to do it, is since there's the drop down. But you can also, if you don't want to utilize the drop down, you can just type in as many letters as you can, maybe something like 200 unif, and we will understand what that means. But ideally, finish the word out all the way and leave in 200 meter unified. So again, list the event as all the way if you can. For that one, we're going to want to put, since it's a unified event, that means Jeff is going to be doing that with one of the unified partners. And we're going to want to put the score and time for that. So the score and time, we'll say for the 200 meter unified race, is 3 minutes and 48 seconds, just as an example. At that point, he has his 2 events for the day, and there is no relay event outside of unified in kayaking, so we would be done with Jeff Rogers for Wednesday once we finish listing the team name, since it's a unified event. In this case, Jeff is on a unified relay with a unified partner named Lou Rogers, so we could list a regular team. Just name, we could say the Rogers brothers if we wanted to, or you could do something as simple as Rogers. And that will denote that whenever that team and team time is being entered, whenever the person entering gets down to the next team of Rogers and Rogers, we'll know to pair them up together. And it is nice if you have multiple teams in the same event. So let's say we have multiple folks from the same team participating in the 200 meter unified, to have distinct names. That way, distinct names do not have to be assigned to the team. So if we went state office team, and then for the next team also listed state office, we would have to assign distinct team names, which can be confusing. So worst case scenario, you can put state office 1, and then the next team do state office 2, so on and so forth. But for this example, we're going to list Rogers and Rogers. So what you probably want to do at that point is then go down and find your unified partner, Lou Rogers, who is participating in kayaking. And Lou down here, for event sport number 1, again, Lou can do up to 2 relays in the day, 2 unified events, but for this case, in this case, we only have him assigned to 1. So we're going to want to put in as event number 1 under kayaking, we're going to want to put in 200 meter unified so that it matches with the athlete's event up above. Then we're also going to want to list the exact same time because we only need 1 time submitted. Do not submit 2 different times because they will not be added together in the computer. Just submit 1 time and then list the team name again. As you can see here, Rogers and Rogers is now entered as the team name. So when we enter Jeff's team and we move on to Sarah, then Henry, then Ken, and we get down here to Lou, we automatically know that Lou is paired up with Jeff up here in the Rogers and Rogers team. And the same times and all that stuff. So we know that this is a pair right here. There's no confusion to be left out about that. Okay, at that point, we're going to be done with Lou now that they're matched, and we'll come back to him later. Now with Sarah Jones, we'll move on to her next. She's an athlete, and her first sport she's doing is swimming, which is a Thursday sport. So we're going to leave the Wednesday sport box completely empty. So we're going to type in swimming under sport. We'll say Sarah's first event is the 25 meter freestyle. You can type in freestyle all the way or type in 25 free. That is distinct from the other events, so that will make sense to us as there's only butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, and freestyle available. As you can tell, those are all different, so make sure that the event is distinct. And then we're going to put Sarah's time in. We'll say 20 seconds. List an S at the end. That way we know it's in seconds and not minutes. And as that is an individual event, we're not going to list a team name. Next, we'll list her second event. We'll say in this case, she's going to do the 100 meter freestyle event. Now they don't have to do the same swims. It could be a breast, it could be a back, it could be a butterfly. But for the sake of this example, we're going to put down that she's doing the 100 meter freestyle. We're going to put in her score then, and we'll say that it is a 1 minute and 35 seconds. And then we're going to leave team name blank. As there's no one else to swim in a relay with her, we're also not going to fill in that relay box. And Sarah's next sport, which is listed for her on the roster form, is athletics. So on Friday, keep in mind athletics is a 3-day event at this point. Check your game's information packet in the future for adjustments on that, if any happen. But we're going to want to list Sarah's first event for Friday in here. So we'll say the 50 meter dash. And for that 50 meter dash, we'll list her time at 18 seconds. Since she is not part of a team and that is an individual event, we will leave that blank. For event number 2, we will throw in, as an example, the 100 meter dash. And for that time, we'll put 40 seconds just as an example. Now, if we look at the roster form, the example we're making here is we have 2 unified partners who are in athletics and 2 athletes who are in athletics. So this is where the relay section is going to come in as an example. So right here, we're going to say that these teams are doing that this athlete is part of a relay, and it's going to be a unified relay as an example, which keep in mind is 2 unified partners and 2 athletes. A traditional relay is 4 athletes. So we'll put 4 by 100 unified. That is going to be the unified relay event for that day. we'll put in the team relay time. So keep in mind a 4x100 is one loop around the track. So you want to make sure you take the relay time of the team out from practice. We'll say they went all the way around the track in 1 minute and 50 seconds. And then we'll list the team name. So we'll say this is going to be State Office 1. Again, that helps us identify everybody that is on that team. Moving down, now we are completed with Sarah Jones. Moving down to Henry Aaron next. Henry Aaron is participating in gymnastics on Wednesday. So we'll go ahead and type that in. For Henry, for his event number 1, we'll say he is doing the balance beam. We'll list a level, whatever that level may be. And we'll put level 1. Then we'll move on to the second event. Whatever that second event may be, we'll put in parallel bars, put level 1. And then that is the event that he'll be entered in, level 1 for parallel bars and level 1 for balance beam. And that completes Henry Aaron's Wednesday. Next for Henry, he is listed in powerlifting. Powerlifting, we want to list the events that he is taking part in, but we do not have to list his events or his scores on this sheet. So keep in mind for Henry that there are multiple events within powerlifting, and those are the supplemental forms, and we will go over how to fill out supplemental forms. But for this case, we're going to say Henry does bench as event number 1. For event number 2, we're going to want to list deadlift. And for event number 3, which will go under relay event in this case, just for powerlifting, we're going to want to list squat. And that is all you need to enter on this form for your powerlifters. Again, there is a supplemental form, and we will go over the supplemental forms. So we're going to move on from that for Henry. Next person we're going to move down to is Ken Smith. Now, Ken is an athlete, and for Ken, all we have listed for him is bocce unified. So what we're going to do with him, now keep traditional bocce is on Wednesday. At this point, again, reference your information packet if you have any questions. But for Thursday sport, we're going to list in bocce then, as that's when unified bocce currently is. For event number 1, you're just going to want to list unified doubles, as that is the event he is participating in. And then we're going to want to enter the team score, whatever that is. You'll want to use the bocce scoring sheet as a reference for this. So you'll list in the score. We'll say as a team, their score was 1,500 centimeters, and then list the team name. In this case, he is participating with a unified partner named Carl Roper, who we'll get down to. So you could put Smith Roper as a team name, or you could put something unique again. You could put down the Raptors, for example, and leave it like that. That way we can identify that he's going to be participating along with Carl. Another option is to put down Raptors and put down Smith Roper, as that is the best way for us to figure out that they have a distinct name, and we can figure out that Carl is the one that Ken is going to be participating with. At that point, that is the only event offered that day is unified doubles, so we're going to leave the rest of the sheet open. Ken was our example of an athlete who is only doing one sport, so we're going to leave Friday and Wednesday open as well. Our next person we're going to move to then is Lou. Now, if you remember, Lou is also participating in kayaking with Jeff. Lou is a unified partner. So he already has one event written in. Now, Lou is also participating on Friday in athletics as part of the unified relay. So we're going to go down here with Lou, And what we'll do is we'll type in, again, we want it to say the exact same thing as Sarah's here. So we'll go 4 by 100 unified. We'll type in the exact same time. Again, that is the time they should have run as a team. And then we'll type in the team name. That way we can identify that these two are on the same team together. At that point, Lou has 2 sports and his 2 events listed, and we are done with Lou. So we will move on to Mary Smith. Now Mary Smith is participating in athletics also as part of that relay team. So again, we are going to want to mirror the exact same thing that we did for the other 2. Moving back up here to Jeff. We forgot to fill this in for Jeff earlier, but Jeff is also a part of that relay team. He rounds out that relay team. So we're going to throw in 1 minute, 50 seconds again, and state office 1. At that point, you will have a complete relay team. Now in that case, where, let's say I submitted my registration, and forgot to list Jeff on that relay, so let's pretend that was submitted blank. The state office will go through and ensure that there are 4 competitors on that team. And if there are not, they will take note and contact you in order to make sure that that situation is remedied. Our last unified partner who needs scores is Carl Roper. If we remember from up above with the Raptors, Smith Roper, Carl is participating with Ken in bocce on Thursday in unified doubles with a score of 1,500 centimeters. Keep in mind, it has to be the exact same score. Then we're going to list the exact same team name. Again, since they're a team, we want them to mirror each other exactly. That way we know that they are a team together. Now you would continue to do that for all of your athletes and unified partners, along with all of their sports and events for each day. Again, use the game information packet as a reference for how many sports and events that your athletes may participate in on any given day at state games. Moving on to the supplemental forms that I mentioned earlier, in particularly with powerlifting. Okay, this is the powerlifting supplemental form. We are going to highlight it here, start it blank, highlight it blank. Now this is the form you will receive. You won't receive it with any of the color on here, any of this stuff. This will be off. This is part of the supplemental form that the state office uses for divisioning. Now those scores that you saw that were just there, we just deleted those out as those were partially submitted scores from the year before that the state office had used for divisioning. Now this powerlifting informational form that you just saw here, on the left that is not highlighted, is the section that you will receive. So what you're going to want to do is list your delegation name. You're going to want to list your LPC's name. Now, as you guys recall, that is Jim Smith. And you're going to want to list your LPC's phone number. Down below here, see, we gotta pull back that information really quick here. Now you'll also want to list your lifting coach's name. So if it is different from Jim's name, so let's say you have a different powerlifting coach. In this case, the powerlifting coach's name, if you recall from your registration form, is Mike Stevens. you're going to want to list Mike Stevens and Mike's phone number. In the event that we need to contact Mike for any clarification on starting lift weights or max lift weights or whichever information is on the form for that given year. So once we have that information at the top filled in, we'll want to go down here and list our power lifter from our other form. We'll want to list his name or her name, but on this case it's him. Henry Aaron. You see Henry is participating in all 3 events. So we're going to put in first and last, Henry Aaron, a nickname if there's a nickname. If there's no nickname, you can leave it blank. In this case, we'll call Henry Bomber. His gender, male. Body weight at the time. Now again, there will be body weight taken the morning of competition, but you'll want to list body weight at the time. So we'll say 180 pounds. What the starting lift weights for state competition are. We'll say 120, 120, and 120, just for the sake of the argument here. And then what the anticipated, these don't have to be your exact max lift weights, but what your anticipated max lift weights for Henry are. So we'll say 140, 150, and 160. And then that is it. When you submit your registration form, you'll want to be sure to attach this along with your registration form that you submit, because this is the information that is given to the powerlifting venue directors for announcing day of and tracking the starting lift weights for each athlete as well as their body weight. Other supplemental forms that may come with the State Summer Games packets and registration form include the soccer rating form. Now again, you're just going to want to look at the soccer rule book for information on how to rate your teams. In this case, you're going to want to list your athlete. If you have an athlete participating in soccer, you'll want to list his or her first and last name. Whether they're an athlete or a unified partner, you can just put an X in this box or fill it in black or anything like that. And then you'll want to put in their average for each one of these skills. And then type in their total average at the end of it. So if the average for all of these skills was a 2, you wouldn't put in the total average of this. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You wouldn't put in 14. You would list a 2 as your total average. Or you could type in 14 here, and then here an overall rating list a 2. Or you could list a 2 for both of them, either or. Because when the state office goes to submit your team together, it will automatically average those out for you. Now on the individual form, you can use the rule book or the individual form here. This is the individual form that you can also use to rate each one of your athletes on our unified partners on this form. You go through basically, again, you can use as an example. It should explain how to do this in the rule book, but you can go through here and take a survey rating for each one of your athletes. So, you know, whoever your athlete has difficulty dribbling and trapping the ball, they would receive a 2 for this box. So on and so forth, all the way to the bottom of the form. And then you would just transfer the score onto this sheet of the document. For other sports that have specifics or have specific supplemental forms that may be attached to the registration and roster email, please contact the state office if you have questions on how to fill those out or how to rate your players. Thank you, and feel free again to contact us at 406-216-5327 with any questions on how to rate players, how to fill in these roster and registration forms, or any other questions you may have in regards to state summer games.